Okay, so I've got my material set up in Revit. Now I want to look at doing some more interesting things in 3ds Max. And so I've got it open already. And I'm going to export my FBX again and go through the linking from scratch because I want to make sure that's crystal clear to you how this process works before you get to do it the easy way in 2013. So on the export submenu, FBX, and then here, I think before I showed you that you can put it into the Revit files folder. You can really put it wherever you like, but oh no, I don't have my import folder already. I'll make it. So I'm going to put it into this 3ds Max files folder, and I could make a import folder. So I'm changing my mind here. So I could make a folder called import there. What I'll do instead though is, sorry, just quickly switch to 3ds Max because it's a good chance for me to show you something. I'm going to set my project folder. So on the main menu, you can choose set project folder, or you can just click on the set project folder button on the quick access toolbar there. And so then I'm going to browse to CAD 3 folder, which is, I thought, where I've been saving. Sorry, I'm going blind here. Is it Loftus Street? Oh yes, okay, sorry, so I've made Broadway there. Okay, so Broadway 3ds Max files is my project folder. Okay, so now you'll see back in Revit, that's the same folder I was just looking in, and it's added all of these new subfolders. So that's what setting a project folder will do for you. It makes all these folders, these complex folders that 3ds Max needs, so that you don't have to go and do that. Okay, so the import folder there is there for things like this that you're going to import into Max from Revit. I'm going to save it there. And now, once it's finished, I can go into 3ds Max.
Is there a reason, like, I tried to use Revit for my last project, just one we did, and I just kept saying Revit is not responding.
Yeah, look, it needs a lot of resources. That's again one of the reasons I like to show everyone 3ds Max for rendering as well, because Revit has huge overhead. You need tons of RAM just to get it to work normally, let alone do the rendering as well. So yeah, it'll be the resources. Just needs a lot.
It needs a lot of RAM.
Yeah, yeah.
So like, if I'm buying, because I'm going to buy a new laptop.
Yep.
What are the specs that I need?
Or 8 gig minimum.
8 gig.
Yeah. 8 gig minimum RAM.
Okay.
Yeah, but 16 if you can. These days a lot of them can do 16.
Okay.
But yeah, 8 gig absolute
How
minimum.
much is one of those $300?
Oh, you'll get them for under 2.
Under $2,000?
Yeah, yeah.
For 8 gig?
Yeah.
Or 16 gig?
Yep. Just look, those Pavilion, the DB6s are pretty good. They've got lots of different types, but generally the DB6 with the decent graphics card and a nice case are well under $2,000. And yeah, but just see if they can do 16 gig, but I know they can do 8. So yeah, they're good, not a bad buy. So under references here, again, this is probably just revision for a lot of you. I'm going to go to File Link Manager, and then File button, and then you can see I don't need to browse because I've set my project folder. It's taken me right to the folder where my FBX file already is. So now I can just open, choose the preset. Now again, I don't remember which preset I showed you before. I may have shown you by material at one stage, but just want to make it clear, this is the one you should be using, combined by family type. So I know I did show you this one as well, but I just want to make it clear to you that that's definitely the one. So once you've chosen your preset, then you can click attach the file or attach this file, and it will import it. Yeah, it can take a minute, but a file like that shouldn't take too long. Okay, so a handy thing to do as soon as you've imported it, which I almost done. I'm not sure that's still recording. Yep. Okay, so it's almost there. That's imported. Now it's not very clear that it's done that. So it's not a bad idea to do a zoom extents all. So bottom right corner, the second button from the bottom is zoom extents all. And you can see then it should fit everything into the viewport. Now it's actually doing a really bad job. So I've got some sort of display issue here. I might actually just reset this one. So if I, oh no, there we go. Okay, so it just took a minute. So, okay, so I've got everything in there. Z on the keyboard is a shortcut for zoom extents all, and now I'll zoom in the perspective view using the wheel, and you can see there is my building. Now, it can take a minute for the display to update if it's set to realistic, but you can see there, eventually it will show you a reasonable view. It's very bright, so now I'm going to go to the rendering menu and then exposure control, and I'm going to set it to MR photographic exposure control, which you can see right away has toned down that brightness. It doesn't hurt to choose a preset. You can see the exposure value is already set to 15. So I'm going to choose a preset, outdoor clear sky, but that's simply going to make sure it is set to 15. Right, so I'll close that one for now. That's the right exposure for an outdoor scene. But now I want to set the camera view. So I'm going to bring back the other viewports using the maximize viewport toggle, and then still making sure the camera view or the perspective view, sorry, is active. If you're not sure, you can always right click a couple of times in that viewport. And then I'm going to go to where it says perspective, right click, and then under cameras, you can see I've got the camera from Revit. So there we are. I've got the same camera view I had in my Revit file. And just to see how it's working, I know it's not going to be a good render, but I'm just going to show you a render anyway, so you can see how much has come through from Revit without me needing to change it. And you can see here, it's actually done a really bad job. Now,
If I had a perspective view for Revit,
yep.
or just in black and white, can I bring this?
Of course, yep, no problem.
Just render it instead of
Yeah, absolutely. Yep,
staring at Revit.
yep, absolutely. Yep. So there, you can see, I know from experience, what it's doing is rendering with the scanline renderer. So if you see that happening, watch out. So I'm going to show you what to do when that happens, and also what to do maybe in general when you're setting up your files from Revit. So I'm going to reset because it's easier than fixing all those settings. So I'm going to say no, I don't want to save those changes, and yes, I'm going to reset. And then I'm going to go to the Customize menu, and then Custom UI and Default Switcher. Okay, so then I'm going to go to Design Views Mental Ray, and then leave it on AME Dark on the right, and then Set. Again, I'm sorry, this is in the earlier videos, but just want to make sure you know these things. So I'll close that one now. When it wakes up, it should let me. Okay, that's, oh, here we go. So that's the message you should see. And so it just was telling me that I need to restart the program. Okay, so I'm just doing that. And it won't take long. Just pause the video there. Okay, so you'll see now that I've restarted the program, it's going to behave quite differently when I go to look at some of those rendering options. And you won't know until you go to look at the rendering that it's a problem. So I'm going to go to the File Link Manager. Again, File, grab my FBX, set the preset, attach this file. Wait around. Let's pause the video. Okay, so we're back to where we were, and so I just have to give it a minute, and there we are. So that's now displaying the way it was before, essentially, but you'll see a big difference. Firstly, I'll just set the exposure control back to MR photographic, and oops, not logarithmic, and choose the same preset. And then the camera view I'll set again, so again on the perspective label there, oops, cameras, 3D view, and you can see already it's actually displaying much better, even though it's unrealistic, because it's using mental ray, it will give you a better display. Now the lighting and shadows here is set to illuminate with default lights. I'm going to set that to scene lights. So they're the lights in the scene, like the sun in this case is the only light. So also I'm going to, again, right click where it says realistic, and then back to lighting and shadows, and oh yeah, I've got the shadows on. So let's look at why I still maybe haven't got any lights. Back to lighting and shadows, and that's all okay. So let's see, that looks like shaded to me, not realistic. No, that's shaded. Realistic. Oh well, I'll live with it. I'll get a better shaded display there in a moment, but just like before, I'm going to click render and show you now what I get from Revit. So again, without doing anything, this is the way it's going to come through with something working. So I've got some light there and I've got some materials, otherwise we wouldn't see anything. So it has come through from Revit, but it's just not rendering quite the way it was in Revit because of a couple of little settings. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that. I won't wait for that to finish. So, yep. So under, again, rendering and exposure control, you'll see you've got the preset for physically based lighting, indoor daylight, which is just like the Revit one. Now this time I'm going to click the render preview, so I can also see, before I go to render, what that's going to do. So this will just take a minute. It's not going to take as long as it would to do a full render though. Almost there. Okay, so you can see there that's better, but still not bright enough. So now I'm going to change it to exposure value, and then I can adjust that exposure value down further to make it bright enough.
So putting it down makes it brighter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's an exposure control, so it's controlling the brightness. So the higher the value, the more control you have over that brightness, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah, blame the photographers, they're the ones who came up with these values. Okay, so that's probably about what I want. Maybe a little bit bright there on the floor, so I'll dial it back to 8 or so. Okay, so that's probably the right exposure for this. So I'm going to render that again now, and you'll see that a lot of the problems I had before have gone away, but it's still going to be fairly dark. Okay, but over here now you can see something. Before we just had this strip of light on the ground and that was about it. Now I've got more over here because there's more bounce lighting.
So basically, when you open the file, you pretty much regret rendering.
Yeah, to begin with, just to, yeah, because that's, I suppose, what you want to see has come through from Revit. So you can see it's starting to render. I'm getting light over here, but it's a bit splotchy, and also still it's probably a bit dark. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that. I don't want to wait for that to finish. And I'm also going to save that before I go and adjust this anymore, because if it crashes, I don't want to lose everything. So again, I'll just call this Broadway. Okay, so a couple more settings I can check. In the render pane here, or the render frame window, I'm going to increase the FG bounces to 2, and that will straight away make a big difference. But also, I'm going to go to render setup under the rendering menu. You can do it there or on the main toolbar. Okay, and I'm going to go to the indirect illumination panel, And so you can see there my final gather settings. And then further down, I've got the global elimination settings. So I'm going to enable that as well.
Don't hunch me, Rita. That's annoying.
Oh, right. So, yeah. So, yeah, so unfortunately I can't make the resolution any lower. Anyhow, it's global elimination. GI is what everyone calls it. And then the other one up there, Final Gather, is the one that you would already be using in Revit, but you may not have realised that it's turned on in Revit as well. So, okay, so I'll just render it again now. And so what will happen is there should be more bounced lighting, as well as the direct light that was coming in through the windows and you saw hitting the floor. Now I've got a lot more light bouncing around off that floor into the rest of the scene, and I've got finally a decent, illumination level.
So so you're using both light and render setup, but also the other rendering.
Yeah, there's the two things. So there's the exposure control, which controls the overall brightness, and then there's the lighting settings or the rendering settings, which can just change the way that the lights work, I suppose, in general. And probably at first the most important thing for the render settings for your interiors, where they don't have enough bounce lighting, just turn GI on. So once you turn global illumination on, you'll get a lot more bounce light, and the quality is going to improve a lot as well, without adding a lot of render time. So you can see there, it's got a lot more light. If anything, the exposure is maybe a bit too low now. In other words, a bit too bright. I can tone that back and make it dimmer, and that might pick up some more detail. But you can see here, it's doing a much better job than Revit was as well in those areas with the complex materials. So you might remember that chair was a problem because it had that semi-transparent material, but in 3ds Max, it's the same material that came through from Revit. It's all the same settings, the same images, and everything else that was used by Revit to make that material. That's all come through into 3ds Max, but 3ds Max is doing a better job of rendering it because of the... Okay, so there you can see it's quite similar to the Revit one, but notice how that's all a lot better quality than what I had in Revit. I'll just, while this is happening, I can bring up the Revit one. Yeah. And so this is still on draft, right? In Revit it was high.
So if you were to do one of these in high, how long would it take?
Oh, if you set it up properly, I could get it down to 10 minutes a frame. Yep.
So it's not like a 3-day cycle.
No, not for small images. For posters, it can be still maybe a day, half a day really, but yeah, maybe a day for like a really big billboard or something. So there we are. So you can see that material there, how it's all still a bit... I can't even describe what's wrong with it, but I know it's wrong. And in 3ds Max, even on draft, it is far, far better. The transparency there, it's meant to be a transparent material. You couldn't even tell in Revit. Okay, so lots of things like that. And the lighting as well, much, much better. I still have to turn on a lot of the really good material settings, and I'm going to go and do that for you right now. But already that's starting to come together. So I'm going to cancel that one as well. I won't wait for that to finish, and go through materials now in 3ds Max. But how good is that, getting the floorboards and everything else from Revit, so you don't lose any of that work. Unfortunately, if you're using ArchiCAD or something like that, you do. But Revit, it's all in the family, all Autodesk, so all of those things come straight through into other Autodesk programs like 3ds Max. It might not seem like that big a thing, but I can tell you in the past that was a massive workload, having to redo everything you'd done in your CAD program when you went over to your 3D program. Okay, so yeah, yep. And you may not even need to do much more to it in 3ds Max, but you can if you want to. So I'll go now and do a lot of work with the materials. I'm going to wait for that one to finish though, since I've waited this long. Come on. Don't want to cancel it with one bucket left. If you're wondering, these things, they're called buckets, the little bits with the frame around them. So there we are. So that's finished, and so I'll just minimize that. And so you can probably tell already my display is going a bit slowly. Here you can see it's taking a while to update that display because there's a lot of complex lighting and things like that going on now. So I'm going to turn that back to shaded, so that it just has a you know, a basic shaded display without any lighting, so it works more quickly. And yeah, I'll do a more interesting laminate one maybe on this desk first. So I'll yeah, I'll start with it. So let's have a look at what it is. So I'm going to isolate that just so I can see. Yeah, okay, so that's come in as one object. Now, I don't want to make this too complicated for you. Yeah, I'm going to go back and use the material editor to get that material for you. So with the material editor, on the main toolbar there, the sphere with the checkerboard, or under the rendering menu, you can go to material editor as well. Now here, you've got an option to choose between compact and slate. If you click on the button on your toolbar, it'll probably take you straight into your slate material editor, which is this one. And you probably don't want to start with that one. So you can go to the modes menu and choose compact from there, if you need to go back to the compact one. Now I'm going to close that just so you can see now, if I go back to the material editor, it'll take me straight into that. So once you set it to use the compact one, it'll remember that. Okay, so I'm going to start with the eyedropper, and so I've just chosen a slot that isn't being that doesn't have any nice material, so just one of these plain grey spheres, and then I'm going to use the eyedropper to pick one of those tables. Okay, and so you can see there it's giving me a big list of materials down the bottom, and so that's because all of these materials are being used by that desk. But that's okay. I just want to adjust the laminate one. So remember, because I've given the names back in Revit, I know in 3ds Max what these materials are. So here you can see we've got this wood laminate, and that's the one I used for that blue desk. So I'm just going to click on that slot, and there's the material. Okay, so I can make my adjustments to that, but I'm going to start with a new one. I'm going to make a new material from scratch, just to show you how that's done in 3ds Max. But notice it's wood laminate here. Now, very important, I'm not going to click on Get Material over to the left. I'm going to click on the material type over on the right. So you've got the two things. You've got the Get Material button on the left. Don't use that. It's the material type over on the right, which will be different depending on what it is. So this will say, or it'll always say something different. Okay, but clicking there, you can change the material into something new. Okay, and the one I'm going to use is Arc and Design. This is the one I'd recommend you use every time. For now, just stick with Architecture and Design. So it's set up specifically for this sort of work. And you should be able to do virtually all of your materials just with this Arc and Design material. It's a really good material. So I'm going to straight away set plastic as my template. Okay, and believe it or not, this is actually what Revit is using. It actually has the programming from 3ds Max to give you those materials. It's using all of these things that are in here. You just don't see it all. So I'm going to go to, I'll go to glossy plastic. So that's how my material looks now. And if you're wondering how I got that, I just double clicked on the sphere to get a larger preview. Now you can see down below is the color swatch. The first one sets the color for the main color for the sphere. So I'm going to change that to, I'll still go with a blue. Bluish sort of color. Yeah, that's something I want. So now though, you can do a few more interesting things. Colors, something I'm sure you can all do. So I'll turn on the background in the viewport as well. Oh, sorry, background in the preview. On the right hand side, you've got this checkerboard button. with the which turns on the background, and so there you can see the reflections as well. So that helps a lot to get a good idea how the material is going to look. And that's just too reflective. I don't want it to be that reflective. So I've got the reflectivity there at 1, which is full reflections. I'm going to drag that down. What it's going to do is decrease the strength of the reflections. So go down quite a way. Okay, I don't want really obvious reflections in this. So that's a bit too much. Something like that. I'm just looking at the preview there. Yeah, something like that, maybe a little bit lower. Okay, so about 0.4. But then the glossiness determines the spread of your reflections. So at, well, let's take it up to 1 so you can see. At 1, you get hard highlights, hard-edged highlights. As you, so in other words, that's reflecting all of the light at those points, in a focus point. As you decrease that glossiness value, it spreads out that highlight. So it's a less focused light. So spreading that out further, eventually you'll see you don't get the highlight as a defined dot anymore, but I do want a little bit of a highlight, so I'm just going to come down so it's a nice soft sort of highlight there. Okay, so that's the sort of glossiness, again about 0.4. And I'll leave transparency for now. Now, just in case you're wondering, diffuse, reflection, and diffuse, refraction, and reflection. Oh, no, sorry, use reflection first, and then refraction are the main controls for your surfaces. Diffuse being the colour, I suppose. That's the best way to think of it at first. And then reflection, obviously being the reflectivity, what I was just adjusting. But then refraction controls opacity or transparency. Okay, so it's called refraction because it controls how the light goes through the material, not how it gets reflected off it. Okay, you've got those 3 main controls for your material. But then going down further, right down to the bottom, you'll see your maps. So they're just the same as the images I was showing you for the maps in Revit. So for the laminate and the timber, you had those images used to make the colour of the material. Okay, now I'm going to use an image for something else. You can see here under General Maps, you've got diffuse colour. So, well, I'll just quickly show you one here. It might be a bit confusing otherwise. When you click on that None button, probably the one you want to use at first is Bitmap, because that way you can just choose an image. And I'm going to do it. I'm just going to go and choose an image file just so you can see one on the surface. So otherwise I think it's a bit hard to relate to maps until you see them. So I'll just use this one. Okay, so now that's very small. What is it? 1 mil? Yeah, 1 mil. So it's tiny. Let's see. I want to make that a meter. That's a bit big. So let's make it 300. There we go. Okay, so I've set this image now as the map for the diffuse colour, in other words, for the colour. So I'm going to use this button here, Go to Parent, and that takes you back out of the map. Notice I'm on Bitmap. So these are the properties for that image, not for the material. Okay, so notice how this is all changed. It's not the panel I had before. So I'm going to go back up a level, Go to Parent, and that's back to the whole material. So here I've got all those settings I had before. I've got the colour and everything up here, the blue. And notice how that little M has gone in next to it. And that's to show me that I've assigned this map down here, the diffuse colour map. So notice it's diffuse colour, in other words, it's the main colour. And that means it's going to ignore that blue colour and use the image instead to set its colours. So that's just so you can see a map used in probably its most obvious way. Then I'm going to clear that, and I'm going to set, as I was saying, a different map. Down here you can see, as well as diffuse, you've got bump. So I'm going to click on the None swatch next to that, and I'll use a bitmap again. And I'm going to choose one that is set up to work as a bump map, I've got these shingles, which I'll just show you in a bigger view. Okay, so you can see it's a black and white image with these lines for your grout or mortar dark, and then the little specks you can see there obviously darker than the rest of the blockwork, so they're going to be the low parts. They're going to look like they're lower than the rest of the surface. Okay, so that's my bump map. And so the size here I'll set to, let's just look at that image again. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 concrete blocks. So they're usually about 200 mil high, so 1200 mil for my height. So that'll be the same for the width. I'll make it 1200. Oh no, so I'm working in centimeters here, so it's not 1200, it's sorry, 120. Okay, so there we are. You can see it looks like a bumpy concrete block wall, but it still uses the color that I've set, because the color isn't coming from that image, just the texture or the bumpiness. So again, I'm going to come back to the parent, go to parent, back to the material, and I can still adjust that color, no problem. Okay, so I won't use that bump map for my desk though, that's a bit silly, but just wanted to see a good example. And so I'll change that now to a another bump map that I have. I just need to get it from a different folder. So it's in here, and so I've got one that is going to do some little well, bumps, I suppose. They're circular bumps though. So that's the one I want. Okay, so I'm just going to get little divots on there, or maybe I'll do actually, now that I've seen it, this one's a nicer one. So that does checker plate. So I'll have a plastic checker plate desk, which is something you can definitely do. Now, the size there probably can be about, oh no, it needs to be much smaller. So that would be just one little area of the checker plate. So it'd be, I suppose, so about that by that. So it's about 15 centimeters. All right, so 15 by 15. Notice I'm working in centimeters. If you don't like working in centimeters, you can always go to your unit setup under customize and then change the display units to whatever you like. It doesn't affect the file, so no problem to change midstream. And I've just done that, and you can see it now giving me millimeters. Okay, so it might be a bit hard to see there, but maybe you can just see in the highlight that it has those bumps. I'm going to go back up a level to the parent again, and you can see that the bump's on, but it's only set to 0.3. So I can make that higher by taking it up. You can even go above 1 and see how now that's much more obvious. So that's good enough for me. I'm going to close that. And so I'll again render this, and you'll see that on the surface. But actually, because it's going to take a minute to render, I also want to show you another thing with the materials. So I'll do that first. I'm just going to, yeah, I'll go back to the parent for this material first. So just remember, it does have a parent. That's the master material for this family. This desk, remember, it's got lots of materials. So these are all the sub-materials. So the laminate materials are the 3 red, green and blue colours I've got down the bottom there, but all of these others are being used by it as well. And then the walls though should be a bit simpler. So I'm going to choose another slot that isn't being used by anything important. The grey spheres are all just plain basic materials. And again, I'm going to use the eyedropper. I'm going to pick on one of the walls, and you can see there it's given me a plain material. It doesn't have all these different slots for different materials. So that'll happen as well sometimes. If you've got a simpler object, it can have just the one material. So again, it's using an Autodesk material. It's not an Arken Design material. And they're actually okay, because believe it or not, they are Icon Design materials. They're just simplified, so you don't see all the settings. But they do render just as well as Icon Design materials because they are actually Icon Design materials. So it's up to you. You can either change it to an Icon Design material to see all the settings, or if the ones you want are there, you can just use them. And the one I want is here. It's ambient occlusion that I'm after. And I think maybe just to keep it simple, I'm going to enable it. And then my max distance, I'll increase that. Now it's on 6.4, should be still in millimeters. So I'm going to increase that to, let's see, 100 should be okay. But I just want to check something. So just bear with me. In the full settings here, I can see the units. And yeah, it is 4. Okay, that's good. So just ignore what I did there. And so that is millimeters. It's just naughty of it. It should be having millimeters there for me, but it doesn't. Now, ambient occlusion is one of those really nice rendering effects you'll see in a lot of high-end renders. It's one of the things that adds a lot of realism to your renders, but it's also cheating. So it's not technically a realistic effect. But really, who cares? It looks realistic. And what it is, it's the bunch shadows. I think I've shown you briefly something about this before. You see in corners, so you can even see it here, rolling along the corners of the room, and in the corners even of the bulkhead, there are darker shadows in the corners. And it's because less light gets in there. So it's bouncing around, but as it gets into the surfaces, as they're closer together, it's occluded from the light, and that's why it's called ambient occlusion. It's actually occluded from your ambient lighting. And so it's a natural effect, but they cheat to give you more of it because to calculate that in the rendering would be, it just takes too long, essentially. So it's a nice effect to add, but you need to tell the program that you want that. And yeah, if that's not clear, it'll be more clear when you see the render. So I'm going to just render now. Oh, sorry, I better put it on the floor as well. So I just need to check that it's using the same material. It's not. Okay, great. So bulkhead 2, and this one is still called floorboards. That's all right. So I can just turn that on there. Okay, so I've turned on ambient occlusion for the wall material and this white floor material, but not for the floorboards material. Okay, so I'm going to render again now, and you should see all of those things. So I might pause this recording, resume the render, so resume the recording. So there, you can see ambient occlusion working in the corners, but that bump map isn't really coming up. I can see there's something happening there, but it's not what I want. I want a really obvious checker pattern there, checker plate pattern. Okay, so I'm going to cancel this and fix that. So selecting the desk there, I can isolate that selection just by right-clicking, isolate selection, and then I'm going to get a closer view of it in the front viewport, Alt and the middle mouse button to orbit, and then F3 to turn on shading. Okay, so now I'm going to go into my material editor again and find that blue laminate material, which is in this original combination multi-material here. There's my blue laminate, and then I'm going to turn on show standard material in viewport. Also show shaded material in viewport. Okay, and there you can see I can't really see any difference, and I should be able to see it. So I'm going to go into the checker pattern, and I'm going to try turning it on. Right, so notice how this button's off again now. If I turn it on, now it's going to try and show me just that image on my surface without the colour, so I can really get a good idea if it's the right size or not. Okay, so that button there, really important when you're trying to see your materials in shaded mode. Okay, so show shaded material in viewport. Okay, so notice how it's got the colour. When I turn it on, it goes grey because it's trying to show me the image, but the image is totally the wrong size. Now, I've set it to be 150 here. I'm going to view that image, and you can see it should be visible clearly if it's that size, but it's not. So I'm going to show you an option here with that desk selected. I can go to the, so firstly, make sure you're on the Modify tab, and then you can see, well, it's good to see the name 1500 by 1000 is the name of this desk because that was the size that I set it to in Revit. So that's right, it's got the right thing. And then in this modifier list, I'm going to choose map scalar. Yep. Okay, and so notice how there, it's picked up a scale now. Don't worry too much about what this means, but if you have a problem with this, just let me know. I can go through some values there that will work, but it can be a bit confusing. You might have to use a bit of trial and error at first to work out how that works, but you can see how clearly that map is the right size now. So, yeah, so it's obvious when you look at it, and that's the best way to get used to it. So now I'm going to turn this option off, and then go up a level, back to parent. I'm going to turn it back on there. Now, it should be showing me something, but see how it's got the color, it's not having much luck showing me the bump map. That's all because I'm on 2012, and I'm going to go and tell it to. So here, show standard, show materials in viewport as realistic with maps. And there we are. It'll make it freak out a bit, but then you'll see in a minute it will, when it finishes being naughty, show me the map. Please show me. It will work in the end. It's just I've got too many programs open. It'll work in the end. So it's just not doing a very good job right now. So I'm going to go to a different option. Show materials in viewport as shaded materials with maps. And yeah, there. Bump maps can be a bit of a problem. With realistic, you'll see the bump maps as well, but unfortunately, I can't show them to you with shaded. So that's a problem. But anyhow, when I render, I know it's right. So I'll get out of isolation mode and I'll render again now. And this will be done hopefully before you're ready to go. So I'll just pause the video, resume the video so everyone hears this. Okay, so those bumps are fairly obvious now, but there is another approach, and I don't want to go through all the maps because we're never going to have time, but I'll just show you one more down here. Displacement will, if you want to, change your geometry. So say you're making a piece of fruit or something, and you want it to be deformed by an image. So you might have, I don't know, a passion fruit that needs to have dimply skin, and it can't just be a sphere that looks dimpled, it needs to actually be a different shape. You can make a sphere in 3ds Max, use a displacement map instead of a bump map, and it will actually crumple the shape. Oh, of course, absolutely, it's the best modeler going around. Yeah, so I'm going to try and give you some examples of modeling in Max.
Okay, so what are you just rendering?
Mainly, yeah, rendering and lighting. Yeah.
So, whatever you do in Revit, can you do that?
Yeah, and more, yeah.
Oh,
It's the best modelling program on the planet because it's only a 3D modelling program. It won't give you your plan sections, elevations to go with that 3D model. Yeah.
So do they design content?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So complex, yeah, organic forms, anything like that. Yeah,
Like Zama and heads and stuff.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, and look, I mean, Maya, the other one I mentioned, is a great modeler, but if you don't know, 3ds Max is known as a killer modeler. It's the best in the business. So, yeah, if you get a chance, have a look at the poly modeling tools. They're just incredible. I'll finish that video though, and